I'll give you this mansion if you can tell me how much I paid for it. Men like you clean floors like these, not walk on them.
Her words gleamed like broken glass. The room burst with laughter. But no one imagined that the man she mocked once shared a bond with that house. A bond the years refused to bury. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Follow our channel so you won't miss the next story. Tales of love, redemption, and second chances. Imagine standing inside the house where every wall remembers your laughter, only now it belongs to someone else. The chandeliers shimmered like constellations over Benedict Canyon, the air thick with citrus, champagne, and wealth. Cameras flashed. A string quartet played something elegant but soulless. Beneath the golden arches of the entrance, the Parker Group Charity Gala glittered, an orchestra of sequins, champagne flutes, and ambition. At its center stood Sloane Parker, 35, CEO, perfection wrapped in white silk. Her smile could cut glass, her posture whispered untouchable. Tonight was her triumph. She had just bought and renovated one of the most expensive properties in Beverly Hills. A $45 million mansion on Benedict Canyon Drive, newly restored as the crown jewel of her luxury division. Behind her, a sign glowed in gold letters. The Parker Estate, 21,000 square feet of perfection. Applause rippled as Sloane raised her glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice smooth as marble, "tonight we celebrate what happens when vision meets value. This home represents precision, elegance." She paused, eyes sweeping the glittering crowd, "and proof that in Beverly Hills only the strongest dreams survive." Polite laughter. Cameras loved her. Investors adored her. Near the catering tables, unseen, a man wiped spilled wine from the marble with an old towel. Jack Lawson. 42. Beard overgrown. Collar torn. A face that once could have belonged on magazine covers, but now hid behind humility. None of the guests knew why. Every time light touched the staircase or the chandelier swayed, his breath caught. Something in the house remembered him, though no one else did. He kept his eyes down as sequins and champagne drifted past. The marble gleamed so bright it hurt. Then he heard her voice, sharp, amused, alive. Sloane Parker stood beside a large display board showing the mansion's renderings. "And to think," she laughed, "someone once sold this place for a fraction of what it's worth. Can you imagine? Poor man must have had no idea what he was sitting on." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Jack froze. The air left his lungs. Sloane noticed him, torn collar, tired eyes. "Hey, you," she called, half smiling. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just remembering something," Jack said quietly. "Do you even know where you are?" she teased. "This is Benedict Canyon, the most expensive slice of heaven in Los Angeles." More laughter. Someone near the bar chuckled. "She's not wrong." Jack's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "I know exactly where I am," he said. The laughter faltered. Heads turned. Sloane's smile sharpened. She lifted her glass like a challenge. "Tell you what," she said, pride glinting in her tone. "I'll give you this entire mansion, if you can tell me how much I paid for it." A hush spread, then delighted cruelty from the crowd. Cameras lifted. Phones recorded. Jack looked not at the people, but at the house, the curve of the stair, the light pooling on the landing, the echo only he seemed to hear. He almost smiled. "You paid $45 million even," he said softly. "Cash to close in 30 days. You shortened the inspection window to 5. And you told your team to replace the oak floors with marble." He paused. "She never liked marble." The room went still. Sloane blinked. Once. How could he know that? Somewhere near the bar, a glass clicked against a saucer and didn't break. Jack's voice stayed level. "Numbers are easy. Meaning isn't. You don't measure a home in square footage. You measure it in the things it remembers. The silence thickened like fog. Sloane forced a brittle laugh. Poetic! But this house doesn't remember you, darling. Houses don't cry for the people who lose them. Jack met her eyes, alive for the first time in years. Maybe not, he said, but sometimes they wait. A beat. Then Sloane snapped her fingers. Security. Please escort him back to the staff area. Jack nodded once, quietly picked up his towel, and walked away. The guests murmured. Sloane lifted her glass again, pretending to laugh, but something cold crept into her chest. As the orchestra swelled, she glanced down at the marble beneath her feet, and for a split second, she could have sworn she heard a sigh, like the house itself had remembered him. When the last champagne glass clinked and the photographers packed up, the mansion fell into silence, an expensive, uncomfortable silence. Sloane Parker stood alone by the panoramic window, overlooking the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles. Down there, the city pulsed with life. Up here, the house felt hollow. She told herself she didn't care about the janitor's words, but they wouldn't leave her head. You don't measure a home in square footage. You measure it in the things it remembers. She shook it off, poured herself another drink, and stared at the framed deed on the wall. Her name gleamed there in gold letters. Sloane Parker, owner. And yet, somehow, it didn't feel like ownership anymore. The next morning, she was already in her glass tower, 40th floor, Century City. Sunlight hit her desk like a spotlight. Her assistant, Diane, slid a tablet toward her. Here's the press coverage from last night. Every outlet picked it up. Diane hesitated. And there's a clip going viral. Sloane looked up. What clip? Diane pressed play. There she was, on screen, laughing, taunting the janitor. Then came his voice, calm and low. Numbers are easy, meaning isn't. The clip cut there, but the internet hadn't stopped. Comments flooded the screen. He spoke with more class than she did. Who humiliates staff like that? That man knew the house, like it was his. Sloane's face stiffened. Take it down. Diane bit her lip. We tried. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, even morning TV. For the first time in years, Sloane felt something she hadn't felt since her father's funeral. Shame. It didn't suit her. It burned. That evening, unable to focus, she called her property manager. Hey, James. The man from last night, the cleaner. Can you find out his name? Sure thing, Ms. Parker. Give me a sec. Looks like he's with Horizon Maintenance Services. Temporary hire. Name's Jack Lawson. The pen in her hand slipped. Lawson, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. You know him. But she had already ended the call. The name echoed through her mind like a forgotten melody. Where had she seen it? Heard it? Lawson? Jack Lawson? She opened her laptop. Typed into the search bar, Jack Lawson, Beverly Hills. At first, nothing. Then the screen filled with headlines and old photos. The Lawson legacy, the billionaire builder who turned grief into gold. Jack and Emily Lawson, the couple who designed a dream. Tragedy strikes, Emily Lawson killed in car accident. Jack Lawson sells Benedict Canyon estate. Sloane froze. The photos hit harder than any headline. There he was, 10 years younger, clean-shaven, smiling under the same archway she'd stood beneath last night, holding hands with a woman whose eyes glowed with quiet joy. They were standing in her foyer. Only then it hadn't been hers. In one image, the caption read, Jack Lawson, self-made billionaire, presents his newly completed home, designed with his wife, Emily, as their forever sanctuary. Her breath caught. She scrolled farther. Another article read, After the tragic loss of his wife, Lawson vanished from public view. His company, Lawson Development, was later absorbed by larger firms. The Benedict Canyon estate changed hands 3 times before being purchased last year by Parker Group Holdings. Her throat went dry. The man she had mocked, the man she'd humiliated in front of hundreds, had built this house with his own hands. That night, she couldn't bring herself to sleep in the master suite. She wandered barefoot through the halls, rooms that gleamed too perfect to be lived in. The air conditioning hummed softly, but under it she swore she heard another sound, a faint rhythmic creak, like the house breathing. She ended up in the old study. On the wall hung a faded blueprint, one she'd never noticed before. She stepped closer, tracing the faint initials stamped in the corner. JL+L Jack and Emily Lawson. Her throat tightened. She sank into the leather chair and whispered to the empty room. "I'm sorry." For the first time in years, she wept. Not for herself, but for a man who had built a palace for love and lost it to grief. The next morning, Beverly Hills woke to sunlight and scandal. The video of the humiliated janitor was everywhere. News anchors, talk shows, even gossip podcasts. Headlines danced across screens. CEO Sloan Parker mocks worker. Turns out he built the mansion she bought. From billionaire to janitor, the tragic story behind Parker's viral gala. Sloan tried to control the storm. She issued a polished statement. "We celebrate every worker's contribution at Parker Group." But the internet doesn't forgive. And that morning, even her board of directors watched her differently. Her assistant, Diane, lingered at the door. "Ms. Parker, the PR team suggests a gesture. Maybe a donation in his name?" Sloan's gaze was fixed on the city skyline. "I'm not giving him charity," she said quietly. "I'm giving him respect." It took her 2 hours to find him. The address she'd traced led her far from marble and glass to East Hollywood, a tired apartment block with flaking paint and iron balconies rusting under the sun. When she knocked, the door opened halfway. Jack Lawson stood there, holding a wrench and a coffee mug with a broken handle, the same eyes gray and steady, though now the light in them was quieter. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Sloan, immaculate even off duty, hair tied, perfume faint, but her confidence faltered at the edges. Jack, in a gray t-shirt and jeans, looked like a man who had stopped pretending life was fair, and somehow that gave him more presence than anyone she'd ever met. "Ms. Parker," he said simply. "Sloan," she corrected, forcing a smile that didn't quite fit. "I came to apologize?" His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. She hesitated. "Yes, I didn't know who you were." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's the point, isn't it? You only apologize when the person turns out to matter." "That's not fair," she said softly. "Neither is losing everything you love." The words hit her like a bell struck deep inside her chest. Sloan took a small step forward. "Jack, I said things I shouldn't have. You didn't deserve that." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "It's funny. Everyone says that after they've already thrown the stone." Her voice trembled. "I'm trying to make it right." "Then listen." He pointed past her toward the skyline glowing in heat and smog. "You see those buildings? I built some of them. I made more money than I knew how to spend. And then one day, I learned that money can't rebuild what breaks when someone dies." His eyes were steady. "When my wife was gone, this world, this view, meant nothing. So I sold the house, because I couldn't breathe in it anymore." Sloan swallowed hard. "That house saved my company," she whispered. "It's my flagship project." Jack's voice softened. "Then maybe it's doing what it was meant to do, helping someone start over." She shook her head. "You don't understand. You could have rebuilt. You could have—" "Could have what?" His tone sharpened. Low thunder under calm. "Built another empire? Filled another room with things that don't talk back? The only thing worth building was gone. Silence. Sloane's eyes glistened but didn't fall apart. Why take a cleaning job, Jack? Why here? He smiled faintly. Because I wanted to see what happened to the house. Because sometimes you need to face the ghosts that still own you. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. You really believe it remembers you? He looked past her shoulder, toward the sun sliding behind telephone wires. I don't know if the house remembers me, but I remember every sound it ever made. He stepped back a little. Go home, Ms. Parker. You have a life to live. I already lived mine. Before she could answer, the door closed quietly between them. Outside, Sloane stood still on the cracked sidewalk, heat rising in waves from the pavement. For the first time in her adult life, she didn't have a word, a strategy, or a plan. Only a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. Shame, mixed with admiration. She looked up at the gray-blue Los Angeles sky and whispered to herself, "What have I become?" That night, she couldn't sleep. Back in the mansion, she wandered barefoot through rooms too perfect to be lived in. The hallways whispered with memories that weren't hers. Every wall felt heavy, as if waiting for something, or someone. She ended up in the old study. On the wall hung the same faded blueprint she'd seen earlier. Her fingers traced the initials again, JL plus L. Jack and Emily Lawson. Her throat closed. She sat in the leather chair and whispered to the empty air, "I'm sorry." For the second time in her life, she cried, not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd broken. And in that still house, under soft moonlight, it almost felt like the walls forgave her. The next morning, sunlight poured through the canyon like gold through glass. Sloane woke with a decision burning under her ribs. She had spent her life mastering control, people, markets, image. But control, she now realized, couldn't buy peace. She picked up her phone. "Diane," she said, her voice steady, "clear my afternoon." "Everything?" "Everything." Then she scrolled to the only other number she'd saved the night before, Jack Lawson. He didn't answer, so she left a message. "Jack, this house, your house, was built on love. I made it a trophy. I was wrong. Please, come back, just once. I'll make sure no one else is here. I think the house needs you." She didn't expect him to call back, but he did, hours later. Just one line. "Tomorrow, noon." The following day, sunlight hit Benedict Canyon like molten gold. The mansion gleamed too clean, too silent. Sloane waited in the foyer, her heart beat loud enough to fill the marble hall. The front door opened quietly. Jack stepped in. He looked around slowly, taking in the staircase, the arched ceilings, the light that once danced differently when she was alive. Every detail that had once been theirs. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Sloane stood by the grand staircase, hands clasped. "You came," she said softly. "I said I would." He walked forward, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as a man confronting what he'd buried. Sloane's voice trembled just slightly. "I didn't bring you here to reopen wounds." Jack gave a dry, gentle smile. "Then why did you?" She exhaled. "Because I think you deserve to say goodbye properly." He looked around, the light reflecting in his gray eyes. "You can't say goodbye to something that's still breathing." They walked the house together, room by room. Each space told a story neither dared interrupt. In the dining room, Jack stopped at the edge of the long marble table. "This wasn't here before," he said. "No," Sloane answered softly. "I added it for staging. People like the image of power." He nodded. Emily liked small tables. Said big ones made people forget how to talk. In the study, he brushed dust off an old windowsill. "Still smells like cedar," he murmured. "I kept that," Sloane said. "Didn't know why." You didn't need to, he replied. The house did. When they reached the master suite, he hesitated at the door. This was her room, he said quietly. Sloane nodded. I left it mostly as it was. The layout, at least. The balcony view. Jack stepped inside, slower this time. He ran his fingers along the railing by the window. I built this lower, he said, so she could watch the sunrise with her coffee. She said mornings here looked like heaven waking up. He smiled faintly, fragile but real. Sloane stayed silent, afraid even to breathe. Finally, he turned toward her. Why are you really doing this? Her answer came slow, trembling. Because I needed to remember what this house was meant for. Because I've built 100 homes, but none of them ever felt like one. And because I can't stand the thought that you walked away from something you loved, believing it hated you back. Jack's eyes softened. For the first time, he looked at her not as an intruder in his past, but as another wounded soul trying to find her way out of her own loneliness. They ended up in the garage, now renovated into a sleek, glass-walled showroom. The air smelled faintly of oil and sunlight on metal. Jack stopped suddenly. There, beneath a heavy tarp, sat a shape he hadn't seen in a decade. He pulled the cover back. An old 1970 Chevelle. Dusty, but intact. He froze. Where did you find this? Sloane tilted her head. In the basement. The contractors wanted to scrap it, but I couldn't. Something told me to keep it. Jack's hand trembled on the hood. That was Emily's car, he whispered. She rebuilt it herself. Said if the world ever fell apart, at least we could still drive away. He turned to Sloane. You could have sold it. I know. She smiled faintly. It didn't feel right, like the house was guarding it. He nodded slowly, eyes bright with emotion. She used to call it the heartbeat. He turned the key still in the ignition. The engine coughed once, then roared to life. A deep, honest sound filled the room, shaking the glass walls. Sloane gasped. Jack laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in years. He killed the engine and leaned back against the car, breathing hard. She's still breathing, he said softly. So are you, Sloane whispered. For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people who had both lost something they couldn't replace, realizing that maybe what they'd found in return was understanding. Then Sloane spoke again, hesitant but determined. Jack, I want you to work with me. Not for charity, for partnership. I'm starting a restoration program. Historic homes, real stories, emotional architecture. No PR, no cameras, just truth. Jack blinked. You're serious? Completely. He studied her. You'd trust me? After what I said to you? Sloane smiled faintly. You said what I needed to hear. Besides, who better to rebuild a home than the man who finally learned what it means to lose one? For the first time, Jack didn't argue. He looked at her, really looked, and said quietly, I'll think about it. As he turned to leave, sunlight spilled through the garage doors, painting him in gold. Sloane watched him go, her chest aching, not from guilt this time, but from a strange, unfamiliar hope. And as the door closed, the house seemed to sigh again, not with sorrow this time, but with relief. Days passed before Jack called again. His voice on the phone was steady, grounded. About your offer. I'll take a look at your project. No promises. Sloane smiled, the kind of smile that felt earned, not rehearsed. That's all I ask. The following Monday, a quiet pickup truck rolled up the mansion's driveway. Jack stepped out in worn boots, jeans, and a clean shirt. No entourage, no reporters. Just a man with a toolbox and purpose. Sloane was already waiting. This time, no high heels, no silk dress. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and a hint of nervousness that looked almost human. Morning, she said. He nodded. Morning. They started their walk around the property. The mansion was still perfect. Too perfect. But beneath the shine, there were tiny fractures in the marble, faint cracks where time had tried to speak. Jack ran his hand along a pillar. "You can polish this forever," he said, "but it'll always whisper where it broke." Sloane looked at him. "So what do we do?" He smiled faintly. "We don't hide it. We seal it. Leave the scar visible. That's how you remember what it survived." Sloane blinked, her throat tight. "That's beautiful." Jack shrugged. "It's true for houses and for people." Over the next weeks, they worked side by side. Jack taught her how to listen to materials, how wood expands with heat, how concrete sighs at night, how walls remember the rhythm of footsteps. He taught her the patience of a craftsman, the humility of someone who builds for love, not applause. And she, Sloane Parker, the woman who once measured success in numbers, began to understand what it meant to feel the spaces she created. She learned to notice the wind in the halls, to walk barefoot on stone, to breathe in the scent of oil and cedar as if it were prayer. One afternoon, as they sealed the balcony railing, a soft breeze rolled through the canyon. Dust shimmered in the sunlight between them. Sloane spoke quietly. "You know, I used to think success was the absence of flaws." Jack smiled. "Now you know success is knowing where the cracks are, and caring enough to fix them." She looked at him, eyes softer than they'd ever been. For the first time, she didn't see a worker or a fallen billionaire. She saw a man who had lost everything, but somehow kept his soul intact. Later that week, Sloane called a meeting. Her team of architects and developers filled the mansion's great room, curious. When she entered with Jack beside her, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some recognized him from the viral video, others only saw the dirt under his fingernails and wondered what he was doing there. Sloane's tone was calm, but commanding. "This is Jack Lawson," she said. "He'll be advising us on our next project." A few raised eyebrows. She continued before anyone could question her. "This man knows more about foundations, physical and moral, than anyone in this room." Jack nodded once, then began to speak. He didn't perform. He simply explained. How design isn't about grandeur, but balance. How real homes breathe, shift, and remember. His voice carried quiet authority, the kind born of pain turned into wisdom. Even the interns stopped taking notes. They just listened. Sloane watched him from across the room and thought, that's what leadership looks like. That evening, after everyone left, Sloane found Jack in the garage again. He was leaning over Emily's old Chevelle, polishing the hood with gentle hands. "You're not afraid she'll be jealous?" Sloane teased softly. Jack smiled without looking up. "She'd like you, I think." Sloane raised an eyebrow. "Yeah?" He laughed, a quiet, real laugh. "Yeah, she would." She leaned against the doorway, watching him. "You loved her so much," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Still do." He paused. "But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore." Sloane's eyes shimmered. Maybe that's what she wanted. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth softening. "Maybe she sent you." For a heartbeat, they said nothing. And in that silence, the house, the same one that had once witnessed loss, now felt full again. Days passed. The mansion began to change, subtly, beautifully. The sterile perfection melted away. Warm rugs replaced the cold marble glare. Fresh flowers filled the air with life. Laughter replaced silence. The staff whispered that the house feels warmer now. And it did. Because it was finally being lived in, not displayed. Sloane spent more time there, often staying late after the team had gone. Some nights, she and Jack sat on the balcony with 2 mugs of coffee, listening to the wind brushing the canyon below. "Do you still talk to her?" she asked one night. Jack smiled. every day. But now, it doesn't hurt the way it used to. Sloane nodded. Maybe she wanted that. He glanced at her. Maybe she wanted you to remind me how to live again. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Maybe she wanted us both to start over. A few days later, Sloane called a small press conference in the garden. No gowns, no champagne this time. Just her, a microphone, and the setting sun spilling gold across the canyon. The staff gathered quietly, assistants, engineers, cleaners, gardeners. No elite crowd, no glitz. Just people who worked with their hands and their hearts. Sloane took a breath and began. This mansion was once just a number on a spreadsheet, she said. I bought it to prove a point, that vision and power could conquer anything. But a man named Jack Lawson taught me something I'd forgotten. Perfection isn't what you buy. It's what you rebuild. She turned to Jack, standing beside her, his hands in his pockets, humble as ever. He built this house once for love. Now he's rebuilding it for meaning. And so will we. Every project from today forward will fund shelters for people who've lost their homes. A murmur of emotion spread through the crowd. Some clapped. Others simply stood still, moved by the truth in her tone. Jack leaned toward her, voice low. You didn't have to say my name. She smiled gently. I did. Because names matter. It's how we remember who built the foundations we stand on. That night, after everyone left, Jack walked the halls alone. The air smelled of fresh paint, cedar, and rain. The house felt alive again, breathing, whispering, forgiving. He stopped under the grand chandelier, the same one that had witnessed humiliation, grief, and laughter. Now it just shimmered softly, like it had found peace. Sloane appeared behind him barefoot, in a simple white dress, the light caught in her hair. Feels different now, doesn't it? She said. Jack nodded slowly. It finally sounds like home again. She smiled, a mix of peace and sadness. Then maybe it's time it belonged to the right person. He frowned. What do you mean? She reached into her pocket and handed him an envelope. Inside, a deed. Signed, notarized, transfer of ownership. 2161 Benedict Canyon Drive. From Sloane Parker to Jack Lawson. Jack stared at it, speechless. Sloane, I can't accept this. Yes, you can, she said softly. You built it. You bled for it. You loved in it. And I learned that no one can truly own something built on love, except the one who remembers why it was made. His eyes shimmered. His throat tightened. She smiled through tears. Don't thank me. Just live here again. For her. For you. Jack looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then, voice barely above a whisper, maybe for us. The next morning, sunlight brushed the canyon with a softer hue, as if even the sun knew it was witnessing something sacred. The paperwork was done. The mansion, once a monument to ego, now carried Jack Lawson's name again. But he hadn't moved in right away. He sat on the front steps, coffee in hand, running his fingers along the wooden railing his wife had chosen. It didn't ache anymore. It felt like memory, not loss. Behind him, Sloane appeared quietly, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. She sat beside him without a word. For a long time, they just listened, to the hum of the city below, the rustle of trees, the rhythm of life continuing. Then Jack said softly, You know, for years I thought this house died with her. Sloane turned her gaze to him. And now? He smiled faintly. Now I think it was just waiting for us to grow into it. That afternoon, a small crowd gathered again on the terrace. Workers, designers, neighbors, people whose hands had shaped that place. There was no orchestra, no stage, no ego. Just Jack, Sloane, and the people who knew what it meant to build and rebuild. Jack stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying. I once thought success meant never losing anything, but it's the losing and the getting up again that teaches you what really has value. This house used to belong to me. Now it belongs to everyone who's ever had to start over. Tears welled in Sloane's eyes, but she didn't hide them this time. For the first time, she understood that vulnerability was not weakness. It was truth. She turned to him, her voice trembling but sure. "What will you do with it?" Jack smiled, a man at peace. "I'm turning it into something called Haven, a place for families who've lost their homes, for people who need a start. They'll learn trades, build, rebuild, and live. The house that once broke me will heal others." Sloane exhaled, the tears finally spilling. "That's beautiful." He looked at her gently. "You started it. You listened." As the guests left, the garden quieted under the setting sun. Only the two of them remained. Jack turned to her. "You could have sold this place again, made millions." Sloane smiled softly. "For the first time, I didn't want millions. I wanted meaning." He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "You gave me a home, Sloane, and I gave you something to feel again. I guess that makes us even." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "No, Jack, we're not even. You taught me that strength isn't the absence of tears. It's the courage to let them fall." He smiled, a quiet, sunrise kind of smile. "You taught me that love doesn't end. It just changes address." That night, they walked through the halls one last time. The lights glowed warm, no longer cold or sterile. Every room breathed again. In the study, the blueprint still hung on the wall, JL plus EL. Below it, in pencil, new initials, SP. Jack noticed and smiled. "You added yours." Sloane blushed faintly. "It felt right." He touched the letters gently. "It fits." Outside, under a velvet sky, they stood together on the balcony. The city below shimmered with life, and for the first time, neither felt alone. Jack whispered, "You know, the last time I stood here, I was saying goodbye." Sloane turned to him, eyes soft. "And tonight?" He took her hand, calloused, warm, alive. "Tonight, I'm home." The camera drifts back slowly, their silhouettes framed by the glow of Los Angeles, the house behind them alive with light. A soft piano theme rises, the sound of forgiveness, of healing, of life rebuilt. There are houses that are built to be admired, and there are homes that are built to be remembered. Sometimes the place where we lose everything is the same place where we finally learn what matters. And love, real love, doesn't save you. It rebuilds you. Thank you for walking with us through this journey of dignity, memory, and rebirth. Subscribe, leave a like, and help us keep sharing these moments of hope and humanity. Your presence here means more than words can say. Until next time, stay gentle, stay strong, and keep believing.